just before the pandemic came, literally in January, several of us, two groups of us went to Israel for a pilgrimage based on the Christian sites, but just being in a dynamic place and just seeing, it's such an extraordinary example of what's going on in the world now. Quite apart from whatever my own upbringing was, the Jewish people had some terrible experiences at the middle of the last century, and all of that resulted in finally having a homeland, and then now chaos reigns again, and it just never ending in this world, just never ending. You sort of build up one reality, and then another reality comes in, unexpected often, whether it's circumstances, politics, economics, war. At this present time, the country of Ukraine is fighting for its life for no particular reason, except that it's just what the divine has willed for the karma of that country at this time. And as I was saying last night, people with awful energy also have power, and none of this is happening by chance. We stand here in front of these extremely enlarged pictures of the masters, which is trying just by physical means to give us some feeling of what the power is. Because the faces are so big, we sort of feel it a little more. This is the reason churches are so big, because they want us to understand how little we are and how big God is. You go into those cathedrals in Europe, and each one, and I don't remember where I was, but there was one where this church was the biggest one of all, so they had a mark, the cathedral in such and so city only goes to here, and the such and so city goes. Is it in the Vatican itself that it has that? Yeah, that you have to. It makes me smile, at least. We must be more holy because our cathedral is bigger, and then ours is bigger still, and ours has more frou-frous and whatever it might be. I was just yesterday afternoon, I just walked 2 blocks from here to South Church, which is on the corner there, and it was not in that location, but it was that congregation that was the hotbed of the American Revolution. And they proudly have all these markers of all the revolutionary things that congregation has done, starting with the American Revolution, but into equal rights, into civil rights, into ethnicity, into gender equality, into the first woman minister, just all like that, and sort of like it's in the wood grain. But just walking around the church, which was built about 100, maybe 200 years ago now, 18-something, late 18-something, and you look at every little thing that was done. The pews have these carved wooden places. The windows are so full of beautiful little bits of glass making the pictures. Everything is painted. And because I myself have been involved in actually creating from nothing, I don't take that kind of accomplishment for granted. I have a very clear idea of what it takes to manifest something, the kind of energy it takes. And I can also just imagine the committee meetings in which they looked at the picture of this and they argued about what they wanted, and then some individual on a scaffold with a paintbrush just making the whole thing happen, everything in this world. And then, of course, Ukraine gets bombed, and all of those buildings that people built so lovingly are reduced to nothing, to rubble. It's just like it comes and it goes, it comes and it goes, and we naturally, anybody who thinks would ask the natural question, why bother? Just why bother? And that's where a lot of people go. And if you go far enough that direction, you become an alcoholic or a drug addict or a suicide. And or depressed, and as I was talking yesterday, or just completely check out of reality, because who would want to? And it's a very intelligent response to the kind of input. And we're living in a time now, where education is atheistic, materialistic. And if you have atheistic, materialistic values, it matches you. But if you don't, you just, like, what is happening here? It's a very hard time to be young. I have a great deal of sympathy. It's also a very good time to be young. As one of my, when I was about 35, I guess, Swami Kriyananda's mother was about 80. And there was a time when her husband had a heart attack. There was a year that he lived. And at the very beginning of that time, when they became unable to take care of themselves, Swamiji asked me to go and live with them, which I did for 6 weeks until another Ananda devotee took on the responsibility for about 1.5 years. But Gertrude Walters, that was her name, she would always introduce me as her young friend. So to my great embarrassment, I have started introducing people as my young friend, But it's really true, because there's this, actually, for many of you know, because I've been on the internet so much, for the last several years, the house that I live in, I've shared with a young friend, Keshava Betts. He sometimes chants for the programs that I do, and some of you know him. But I don't think of his age. He's just a friend, and he's a peer on the spiritual path. And we were talking about something. I don't remember what it was. And I said to him in a very companionable sort of way, well, at least we're not 25 anymore. He said, technically I'm 26, but I don't think still that really applies. I said, without any forethought, out of just the compassion of my heart, oh, you poor sap, it's all in front of you. It's like that. Because it is. It's in front of us again. If you take reincarnation as part of the story, it's just, here we go again. Here we are, and here we go again. Master said the reason that babies cry when they first come out of the womb, the start of the incarnation is when they inhale. I mean, of course, everybody's nervous until the baby breathes, but when they inhale, that's the actual beginning. If you're doing a horoscope, that's actually the time that you should count. Master said the reason they cry is because they say, oh my God, here I am again. And the whole thing is going to start over. Those of you who have young children, I don't have children of my own, but every time I see a little baby and they're just doing their thing, oh my God, you poor sap, it's all in front of you. But here we are. And the really big question is, who am I and why am I here? And the world will give you lots of answers. And our own vrittis. Vrittis are the whirlpools of energy that are stored in the chakras, which is the karma. Karma is, we identify with what happens to us. We define ourselves by the experiences that we're having. And every experience that we have has a certain vibration of consciousness. If you think of a piano, and the man comes in to tune your piano, or used to, now it's all electronic, but they used to come in to tune your piano, and you would have, after a while, they advanced to the point where they had this little machine that had the right tone, and it's literally a vibration. Just a moment. Each one of those notes is very exact. And if you think on a fundamental level, and I'll just step back for just a moment from that analogy, it's like we are here to move from limitation to freedom, from defining ourselves as this body that we're living in, the personality, the things we like and don't like, and all of the extra things that come along with this particular body, ethnicity, gender, the gender of the body that we're in, the attitudes that we have, intellectuality, music, whatever it might be. We have all those defining qualities, but in truth, our consciousness is infinite. We are, in an enduring way, the Sanskrit word is jiva. There's no other word in English or other language that I know that's as good as the word jiva. In English, you say the soul. But the soul is a little bit of a confusing word, whereas jiva is very exact because it's individual and unique, but not limited by the physical world. It's the part of our awareness it's the bubble that is part of the great ocean. And even after it merges into the ocean, it's still an identifiable, separatable little bubble, which is always us. And it's that jiva is the consistent reality that goes from incarnation to incarnation and gradually begins to realize what and who it really is. But in between, we are just simply unaware. The word realization, which Kelly, that was terrific. Putting the real into realization, I think that was classy. I liked it. Whether it applies to me or not, I think it's a very clever word. But the word realization is a really good word because when you realize something, you haven't acquired it. It's always been there. It's just you were unaware of it and you become aware of it. And a lot of the spiritual path, a tremendous amount of the spiritual path is just picking it up by the right string and getting the right perspective on it. Because we tend to fall into this sense of lack or that there's something missing, I'm not good enough, I'm not really loved, I have to earn, all these other things that somehow I don't have it and I will have it. But that's not true. It's always with us, we're just not aware of it. We haven't realized it. When you realize something, there's that feeling about it, isn't there? Like, oh, I just realized I have all the money I need to take the trip, whatever it might be. It's like I just realized that. I just realized that, my mother always loved me. She was just acting the way she had to act. Whatever it might have been. It comes to us, a fact that was there, a reality that was there. It just comes to us like this. So the jiva is that continuing individual awareness that gradually transcends all other limiting understandings. So if we think of ourselves as being that the goal of what we're doing is this infinite awareness. I mean, this is why we have the pictures of the masters here. They're honestly, and this is the hardest thing to realize, they're exactly like you and me. This is one of the great mistakes that Christianity makes at this point, is that they think that Jesus was just the first and only. That revelation began and ended with Jesus Christ, is how someone put it to me once. That was just the beginning and the end. And everything that was in the Bible that gave some idea, like reincarnation and a few other things, of where Jesus came from and how he got to be who he was, has all gradually been removed. And so as a consequence, we can love Jesus and he can save us. A lot of the basic theology is sound. It just doesn't have sufficient context for us to actually know what to do about it. Whereas what Yogananda brought and what his line of masters brought, same God realization, same we are the sons, if you'll excuse the gender language, I feel so sensitive about these things now, but masculine and feminine are cosmic realities. So when I say sons or daughters or men or women, I'm not talking about physical gender, I'm talking about vibrations in the universe. Yin and yang are nice because nobody reacts to them, but they're the same words, right? But they're the same words that we recognize that we are offspring of the infinite and what belongs to the Father belongs to the child. But Yogananda, Babaji, Sri Yukteswar, Swami Kriyananda, they talk to us about how they got there. And they talk to us about previous incarnations and about the process of realization. And the most remarkable thing to realize is that the Jiva, that was Jesus, the Jiva, that was Yogananda, every single thing that any of us go through, they have gone through it. They became realized, the same as we will become realized. And with infinity and perfect awareness of our divinity is at one end of the spectrum. The opposite end of the spectrum is a completely materialistic concept of the universe and of self. And everything that we do, every thought, every feeling, every reaction, everything reflects a vibration of what we think is the answer to the question, who am I? What is real? Where does happiness come from? What causes suffering? That's what I was talking a bit about last night. We're always making decisions, and we're always responding to the world around us according, not to some big intellectual idea that I can spout, but what I really believe is true. Just yesterday, or day before, when I was coming back from the airport, and we were just driving, and the Boston airport is memorable. Let's just leave it there. It's a memorable experience, and we were somewhere where I thought we were about to smash into some cement, something or another, for no particular reason. It was just, that's what it looked like to me. And I flinched. And every time that happens, I say to myself, when will I ever learn? There's a story, an autobiography of a yogi about a sadhu, an advanced yogi who was being pursued mistakenly by the police. And the police officer, the whole story is so bizarre. The sadhu wouldn't stop even though the police were trying to stop him. They thought he was a dangerous criminal, so I guess the policeman had a machete. And so he just, to get the man's attention, he hacked his arm off. You would think some other method might have worked. But anyway, in the story, he hacked his arm off. The arm falls to the ground. The sadhu doesn't flinch. That's the part I'm talking about. He doesn't flinch. He just calmly picks his arm up, puts it back on, and it miraculously heals. And then he calmly says, I'm not the criminal that you're seeking. But the part of that always I noticed is he didn't flinch. And it would sort of be like if somebody kicks the stand over there and knocks over the Kleenex box. Why would I flinch? It's not me. But when it's this body, I have this very deep feeling that this is me and something has happened to me. I'm also extremely attached to my ideas. And if you don't agree with my ideas, let me phrase it differently. This is because it's not exactly true. But when I will put this in the past, I have been very attached to my ideas, and when I wanted things done a certain way and people didn't want to do it that way, it often felt like a near-death experience to me, which would prompt in me what I called a panic survival response, which would cause me to intensify my arguments in favor of my ideas at a more rapid speech and a higher pitch. The fact that this was not effective took me about 25 years to figure out, but nonetheless, because my ideas are really super important to me, okay? Way out of proportion. As one of my dear friends said to me wonderfully, so sweetly, you're not right as often as you think you are. Which has subsequently saved me from a lot of grief, and the people around me too. Anyway, every time we do anything, we are affirming some level of reality. And so there's a point, and I presume all of you have crossed it, else you wouldn't be here, but you might be here just to find out whether you are interested. There comes a point in our evolution, and nobody can hasten that. You know, they can't put you in a warm oven and make it happen faster. It just won't. But there's a certain point when we have enough experience, and that's why Master called it the science of religion. There's a point where we've done the experiment. The Jiva, I don't know why, that's the way God made it. I can't answer any of these questions, but the Jiva is compelled to have one experience after another, and to constantly, probably in the astral world, our guardian angel says, and how did that work out for you? You know, and sometimes we can say pretty good, and sometimes not so good. And we try to learn, maybe we'll try it again, we'll try it in a different way, that we just keep having enough experiences until some of the fundamentals about what causes happiness and what causes suffering and who am I and what is real begin to penetrate. And the demographic, so to speak, of Ananda, which is something that we would think about trying to share the news of what we have to offer, you can't find it very easily, but there is this is the demographic. Somewhere along the line, it has occurred to us that the inner world is the starting point for everything else that happens. And of course, I'm sure you know people, and I know many people, for whom that is simply, they don't know where to connect with that idea. It simply doesn't exist. And they can be very honorable, fine people having experiences, but they believe that you adjust to the outer world. They don't understand that the inner world is where we are. And the second part of that is somehow it occurs to us that even though our bodies are separate one from another, that we are not actually separate one from another. And that each of us individually, this Jiva, is a manifestation of a much greater reality. I am part of that greater reality, and how I relate to that greater reality from inside myself is what I'm here to learn. The form that takes afterwards is not really very important. It just depends on our karma, our inclinations, our affinities. You know, we experience all the time in this world that we have affinities for people. There are people in my life that 15 minutes, we're lifelong friends. It's just like, oh, there you are. Just over breakfast, someone was asking me about meeting Swami Kriyananda. I have no explanation for what happened except reincarnation. Oh, there you are. It's a chapter book. You know, you're reading, I like to read novels for fun. You get to the end of a chapter, and if it's a good book, you know, the whole chapter ends in some way, but you just turn the page. And sometimes you're in another time and in another place, but it's all built on all of these other chapters. So that's what our lives are. It's just a chapter book. And so you get separated at death or for a number of incarnations, but oh, there you are. Love at first sight. People have it all the time. You meet someone and you just know. And you do, and your baby is born, and hello, there you are again. Just like that. Or you pick up autobiography, or in my case, Swami Kriyananda walked into the room. Oh, there you are. This is just what I was waiting for. Everybody's nodding. You all know this. Exactly. So we go through enough experiences, and we learn from experience. Nobody learns from being told anything. I mean, anybody, again, who's ever tried to raise children knows that. Yeah. Or be married, you also know that, right? We never learn we tell each other things all the time, but we don't actually learn anything from each other. We just, if somebody says something that you know to be true, they can articulate it in such a way. Like when my friend said that I'm not right as often as I think I am, I recognize that. Yeah. They didn't teach me, but I recognize it. Oh yeah, that is true. That's exactly how it's happening. So every time we react or do anything, because we identify with this event, which is me or you, we hold on to it. The mechanism of doing so is the chakras. I have countless hours on my YouTube channel about the chakras, and they're all interesting. But the chakras are the energy centers from the base of the spine to the crown of the head, and they represent fundamentally, there's many ways to speak of the chakras, but it represents fundamentally that spectrum. The first chakra is the earth chakra, the seventh chakra is the superconscious freedom chakra. And just to be clear, the chakras are all good. They just have different directions, but from pure materialism to pure freedom, this is the spectrum. And vrittis, this is where I started this whole conversation, these vrittis, these little whirlpools of energy, are deposited in those chakras, and they hold that vibration, which is when I think this body is going to get crushed, I flinch, which would be a defining of myself as a material being, and that death or injury of this body is going to hurt me, what I call me. Personal pronouns, which are also a big story going on right now, but personal pronouns are super important because how do I define myself? When I say I, what am I talking about? And tremendous amount of the misunderstanding of the Christian Bible, of the New Testament, is because Jesus used the pronoun I in a certain way, and subsequent generations of priests can only imagine that he meant his limited physical body. So when he says I, but when he said I, if you read the Bhagavad Gita and read from the India side, when a master uses the pronoun I, he's speaking of infinity. Because the body is it's a part of it. He's responsible. Yogananda said, when I take a new incarnation and see the personality I have to assume, the body I have to live in, the personality I have to assume, he said, it's like a heavy overcoat on a hot day. He says it's kind of uncomfortable and itchy, but then I get used to it. But when they say I, they never think of just this little body because they have identified that Jiva has liberated itself from these little identities. Kriyananda used the phrase, Kriyananda is an event for which he was responsible. Those of you who've ever organized big events, I've organized a lot of them. Some of you organize this, you know. Running an event is a big job, and you have to pay a lot of attention to it, but you never think, I am the breakfast that we're serving. It would just be ludicrous. To the masters, when we say I and think it's this body and all the stuff that it's involved in, they think it's ludicrous. We're like children. We are children. It's not like we are children. That's why we speak of it that way. So each of those little experiences makes a whirlpool of energy in the chakras, and the chakras gradually become an energy pattern that is a perfect reflection of the sum total of our understanding of the question, who am I, what is real, where does happiness come from, where does suffering come from? And so we move around, in a physical way, but we're actually being moved all the time by the magnetism and the energy inside our chakras. And because this is an energy universe, not a material universe, it's the magnetism of those vrittis that determine everything. Determines where we're born, who we marry, who comes to us as our children, our success, our failure. It's our karma, in other words. And the karma is something we don't know, just something we haven't yet learned about who I am and whether I'm real or not. Now, it's very important. I have put over the years a tremendous amount of energy explaining from every angle that I can think of what the chakra system is, how it works, how you work with it, because I have found, at least, once you can get that really clear, then actually everything else follows from it, because then you really understand how to influence your fate and how to really change yourself. And when we die, when the physical body dies, now we have all these wonderful death and return stories, and we also have with it wonderful movies where we have this thing illustrated now, just as common knowledge. The more things become popular, sometimes the more confused they get, but in this one it's actually going pretty well. you have the same actor with the same makeup and the same beautiful hair and all of that. They die, and then they rise again. And then they walk around this world and, nobody can see them, and they can walk through the walls and all the things that happen. But it's actually not a bad representation, because what it's saying is not that you will look exactly alike or be a ghost or any of those things, but it's saying, well, I'm going to quote Swami Kriyananda, nothing happens when you die. I mean, we think something big happens because from this side it looks really big. And it does look really big because a whole story is over. This is you get to the end of the novel and all of a sudden you're at the hardcover. One of the best succinct bad reviews of a book I read was someone said there are too many pages between the front and the back cover. When I finished writing the biography of Swami Kriyananda, Light Bearer, I was a little appalled by how many pages there are from the front to the back cover, but there was nothing I could do about it at that point. But that's always been in my mind. I don't want anybody to just say that. But when you die, you close that book. You don't close the book, but you definitely close that book. And so something very real happens, but not from our point of view. This was what all the death and return stories tell us. We just go on. And what goes on is not our physical body, but our energy body, which is the chakras. And that's how karma goes from one life to the next. Because the form of it, we don't have the house we're attached to and the people we were married to and the children that we love and the vacations we never got to take and the money we have in the bank. I mean, it's not any of that, but it's the vibration of consciousness that represented to you. Security, power, love, and everybody uses things differently. It's not like, for some people money is power, for some people money is security, for some people money is how they get love, how they get self-importance. And it's not what it appears to be to anybody's external, but simply what it is for us. Okay? Now, when we start talking, as we're supposed to be talking about today, about how to awaken your spiritual power, it's a perfectly fine sentence, how to awaken your spiritual power, but there's many other ways to think about it that I think are better. One of the interesting factors that we have to realize, and again I point to the masters behind me, we use words like unconditional, free, perfectly free, infinite, eternal, all of these different things, which all mean unchanging. That it's the consciousness of a self-realized master is unchanging. It's not modified anymore by any conditions. Our consciousness is modified. All of us have had probably better and worse moments already, just this particular day. I was having some weird, intense dream just before I woke up. Now I can't remember what it was, but I was somewhere else in my subconscious mind, and then I woke up and tried to figure out where I was, what I was doing, and just all these different oscillations of consciousness. Swami Kriyananda remarked once that he's exactly the same asleep or awake, is how he put it. Sometimes he would have dreams of different kinds, but his personality and his perception of reality was always exactly the same. I said to him, that means you have nothing in your subconscious. And he sort of reluctantly said, yes. Whereas I know that I have lots of vrittis that are always reaching up and grabbing my attention. So coming back to the masters, coming back to the divine mother, however you want to think about it, they are always exactly the same. The light, the power, the grace, the love, the willingness to help us, it's exactly the same at all times. There's nothing that we can do to cause them, even on the slightest level, to withdraw their commitment to us. This is a very hard thing for us to understand, because in the world we live in, We're always accepting, rejecting, judging, modifying, opening, closing, all of these ups and downs, and we naturally project that onto the infinite. We make God after our own image, which is highly unfortunate and completely untrue. And we also make, even of the masters, that they're somehow very unsympathetic. And this is why the fact that there's not a single vibration of consciousness that we can pass through, that every one of these masters hasn't, not only is sympathetic with, but has actually lived through. Master made the remark that he remembered all the way back to being a diamond, right? I wear a diamond now for the planet Venus, and I look at that and I think, oh my God, who are you? You know? Because I have these 3 gemstones, and each one of them was individually selected. And when I selected them, they were like, this was the one I had to have. And I have a penchant for big, gaudy jewelry, but anyway, that's beside the point. They were personal. They were very, very personal to me. I asked Swami Kriyananda, somebody else put the question to me, and because I had access, I asked Swamiji, how long did it take Master to get from being a diamond to a master? Swami said first, he said, that's a ridiculous question. By that point, I was quite comfortable, and I said, I thought it was very interesting, sir. There was a time in my life when I would have shrunk, and he wouldn't have said that to me at that time, but I was perfectly comfortable. And often Swamiji would reject, not often, but sometimes, he would reject something, and then the next moment he would respond to it. So he rejected it with that comment. I defended the interest. And then he said, all time is short compared to eternity, which was clever, but not an answer. So I still don't know. However, if from Master's position of God realization, which he said came to him a long time ago, whatever that means, all time being short compared to eternity, he said, that means that everything that you have to do to get from there to there, he lived through. So when we're in the midst of all of this, and we think we've just suddenly created some final new condemnation that's so bad that nobody's ever done it before, don't kid yourself. It's unique in our particular scramble, but it's just a vibration of consciousness that we didn't understand, we thought would make us happy. So we did it because we thought it would, and we get to find out whether or not it does. That's all. That's all we're ever doing. We're just having experiences. Whether we learn from them or not, that's the optional part. Because we can just keep insisting, as people do, that I'm right and this is how it should be. And we fight against self-honesty. Is really, Master speaks often of humility as being, one of the finest virtues on the spiritual path, which of course that sounds nice. We be humble, we be meek, this seems like a good idea, sort of. I mean, were any of these folks meek? Hardly. But what his definition of humility is what you have to understand in order to understand that importance. Humility, Master said, is self-honesty. Isn't that interesting? Because the biggest obstacle to the spiritual path is an unwillingness just to be who we are. We think that spirituality is something I put on. Yogis are this way and therefore I'll be that way. Yogis go to the Himalayas, yogis don't have worldly desires, yogis are always nice, whatever it might be. And so we try to be like that instead of actually asking the real question, who am I? Why was I born? What am I here to do? Swamiji was once asked, how can I tell what my dharma is? Swami said, if there's a job to do and you're next in line. I mean, that's how much sort of sentimental, romantic, your destiny he gave credit for. Now, that doesn't mean that it's as simple as that, but it is almost as simple as that. It's not a question of this, we all want to be important. The hardest thing for people to accept is that we're just kind of in the mediocre middle, really. A woman friend of mine was so worried all the time about whether she was doing things well enough. And I finally said to her, I took a risk, but I knew her. I said, you're perfectly adequate at everything that you do. And fortunately, it was just the right thing to say. And she just cheerfully went around and told everyone that she was perfectly adequate. For myself, at a certain point when I was fighting this battle, I realized that I was a pretty nice person. I wasn't a real nice person, but I was a pretty nice person. And in the greater scheme of things, being a pretty nice person is not a bad thing to be. It's just like I could face master at the end of my life and say I was a pretty nice person. Next time, good luck next time, honey, But but humility is just to see things as they are. And I mean, maybe you are really outstanding. Maybe you've won the world prize for something or another. Maybe you're the best singer, the best violinist, the most innovative dancer, the most fantastic writer, the richest man on the whole planet Earth. Because if it's true, it's true. And even to repudiate it is not humility. Because if it's true, what we're trying to adhere to is truth. We're not trying to adhere to anybody's strange ideas of things. A woman friend of mine who was a musician, and she had unreasonable standards, is the only thing I can think of. And every time she would play, she played beautifully. I would say, oh, it was just such a wonderful performance. No, it wasn't, she would say. I made so many mistakes here, I didn't do this. And after 10 or 12 times of this, I said, I compliment you. And then you essentially tell me that I'm too much of a Philistine to be able to tell what good music is, and that my whole appraisal is wrong. I said, I compliment you, you insult me. I think there's something really wrong about this. But she just, in the name of humility, she was just denying the truth. She played beautifully. There was just no way around it. Sure, the truth might also be, by her standards, there was room for improvement. That's fine. But it was beautiful. But say she's the best in the world, like in 100 years, who will know? When there used to be bookstores, remember bookstores? And there was this big used bookstore in Palo Alto that friends of ours ran. And Swamiji really liked books. No surprise, he's a reader and a bookworm, and he always liked books, and he liked to read good novels when he would travel. So I come by it honestly. But he said it would be very discouraging to him because this was a huge used bookstore. He would go in there and he would see authors who had been extremely popular in their day. There would be dozens of their books and nobody would even know who they were. So here he was, writing all these books, and especially in America, taste is so fickle, it just passes in no time. But even if you're the best in the world, I mean, how many planets are there? And who's going to care 100 years from now? So you're just going to be the best in the world. It doesn't mean anything. It just simply is a fact. Or you can be the worst. But most of us prefer to be the worst if we're not the best. It's the mediocre middle that's really hard to take. I'm nobody particularly special in the eyes of the world, but God loves me. That's where real humility comes from, because you see, that's also part of the truth. Master writes this poem, God's Boatman, about his commitment to his disciples. He says, I'll return again and again, 1 trillion times if necessary, crossing crags of suffering with bleeding feet. I mean, it's a little dramatic, as long as one stray brother is left behind. And he writes it on purpose, with that kind of drama. And each one of us, whether you're a disciple of this path or not, it's the promise of the divine that we belong to God. And we will never be abandoned. And you can just try anything you want to try to wiggle out of that, but you will never be abandoned. Now, really take that one in. We're talking about how to awaken your spiritual power. I haven't forgotten the title. That's how you awaken it. That is how you awaken it. Because it's not ours. That's the whole mistake. It's like, I think I'm going to get my ego organized and get it so perfect and all this stuff. You know, you never will. Some little vritti's just going to eat your consciousness at the last. I promise you. Well, maybe I shouldn't promise you. Maybe you'll be different. But we just never know. We never know what karma's going to hit us. Ever. We just don't know what's buried. And it's great when it comes up. We don't like it. I don't like it much. But it's wonderful because, oh look, one more piece of the chaos that has been my past lives is now going to come to light and be smoothed out, and I'm going to be free. Because what do we really want here? But the power it's not our power. Power is constantly emanating. I don't know if I said it last night, but one of the ways that I've moved myself from being exceedingly depressed about the state of the world, I've just mentioned a few little things here. You know, these are not cheerful times. We are cursed to live in interesting times. It's not exactly whoever made that up, but we are. But the point is, it's light and shadow are having a fight. And it's not darkness, because there's no such thing as darkness. It's light and shadow. It's a very important difference. And I realized it in Yogananda's poem Samadhi. Vanish the veils of light and shade, he calls it. And the obvious thing to say would be light and darkness, wouldn't it? But he doesn't. It's light and shade, light and shadow. Shadow happens when light is shining and we block it. Isn't that interesting? So nothing has to change. You don't have to be different. You just have to step into the light. Stop blocking the light. Move out of the shadow. And once we begin to understand the extent to which we are loved, and the Jean Vianney, French saint, if you knew how much God loves you, you would die for joy. A group of people at Ananda years ago made a marvelous skit out of that. You know, just this, I don't know how it happens, but you know, anyway, so I always have this picture in my mind of these goofy people in costumes in our community, and one says to the other, if you knew how much God loves you, you would die for joy, and then she dies for joy. Just right there. So it's very vivid in my mind. I always think about that. Oh! But why would he say that? Why would he make the whole spiritual path just that? And it's amazing to contemplate. It's a very powerful meditation. Just like, am I loved? I had a seclusion, one of the seclusions I was able to take a number of years ago, and I was, you know, doing what we're instructed to do, lifting your energy up to the divine and so on. And I just had this sudden idea that maybe I would just let God love me instead of me putting out all this energy. Very, very interesting, because I have a full understanding, I have a full belief. And so I was meditating. I mean, I'm going like this because it just sort of demonstrates how you're trying to be super receptive like that. I could feel that the divine energy was there, and I could feel that it was meeting a contrary vibration in me, you know? And it was just this other energy, because we're only talking about vibrations, right? So this vibration of divine love is trying to come in me, and I'm holding on to. I was a little bit of somebody owes me an apology, although I hadn't gotten it to those words yet. But I'm a little annoyed with this one. I'm a little upset with that one. I'm a little resentful of this one. And a whole lot of, what about me? What about me? What about me? You know, am I going to be able to do it? Am I really this? Am I really that? Am I doing the right thing? You know, all just. So all this whirlpool of what about me? What about me? What about me? Just going on like this. And Divine Mother, she didn't care. She could see what I was. And, you know, it was good enough. I was perfectly adequate, you know. But my own habitual vibration was contrary. It was contrary. And so there was only so much light that could come in because I was creating a shadow like this. And out of good intention, you know, a high-achieving family with a lot of that sort of energy, just thinking, I have to do something in order to be loved. Now, in my own family, I was loved, so it's not, I was not challenged in the way that some people are really challenged. A friend of mine, extremely touchingly, came to me recently. She's a peer. She's not a young friend, she's just a friend. And she had terrible karma in terms of the family she was born into, the way she was treated, the expectations. It was awful. I know, unfortunately, it's not uncommon. And she has suffered for decades from all of that. And she just came to me the other day and said, you know, I was born thinking I wasn't lovable, so I manifested a family that just kept telling me that was true. She said, but I came already committed to that idea, so who else would I be attracted to? So I was attracted to people who constantly reinforced it. And then she said to me, they were wrong. She said, and I was wrong. And she's been completely different since then. I mean, she's just the same person that she ever was. And you would think it was just that much of a shift. And once that happens, you see, everything else flows. Everything else flows after that, because it's already there. We just have to stop blocking it. And the wonderful thing about the spiritual path is that it's always with you. I mean, and that's also the terrible thing about the spiritual path. Many decades ago, when there was I don't know if it still exists, but there was a magazine called Psychology Today. And it, when meditation first started coming on the scene, you know, in the 60s and in the 70s, a lot of people who were, you know, what they called, I don't know if these words are still active because I'm not in this field, the type A, driven to success sort of person who was dying from heart attacks at young age and thought if they meditated they could get rid of some stress. So the article in Psychology Today was called The Dark Side of Meditation. I don't have the paper anymore. I had it in a file for decades. The Dark Side of Meditation, which we always loved it when all these things would come out. You know, it was just like people were having, it was so entertaining what the universe was trying to do with what we were doing. But it actually turned out to be a very good article because all these type A, high achievement people were driving now. And now, not only do they have to make money and have successful lives and have big houses and all the things that you have to be divinely perfect, you know? Like there's absolutely no limit. You have to be divinely perfect. So the dark side of meditation is how neurotic it makes type A people to now have to be divinely perfect. You can fail forever on this one, right? You can just never get it right because we look at the external and we think that we have to get it organized and do it right. I suffered a lot in my life, partly because I mentioned to you yesterday, I was born in El Paso, Texas, and I was given an exaggerated sense of my own capabilities just because a lot of the people around me were kind of short, so I looked a little taller than I really was. But weirdly, through all that upbringing, I was school smart. And if you're school smart, people think that you're a lot more than you are. I was school smart effortlessly. I don't ever remember learning to read. Everybody in my family could read, so I could read. Just like I just knew how to do school, but I knew that I didn't know anything. So on one hand, you're being praised, and inside yourself, this is effortless. I mean, the fact that it was slightly meaningless was also there, but it required nothing of me, and yet it got all this praise. So it made me schizophrenic inside, just really like crazy. Well, like, am I really worthwhile? Am I not worthwhile? When all of this, just goes on at the same time. I lost the thread while I was saying that. But where was I? Oh, type A people, yes, exactly, thank you. So I always thought that I had to create the perfection. And of course I couldn't because I'm not right as often as I think I am, But also it was fundamentally wrong. So of course, now there's another side to it, which is, this is in Swami's commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. There's something called the gunas, which are the three forces that operate in the material plane. One of them is the darkening, lazy, let's do nothing. The other is just activity without any, without any purpose. Let's just stay busy like this. And the last one is elevating, uplifting. And we're here in this world to master the gunas. In fact, one of the definitions of a God-realized master is Triguna Rahita, master of the gunas. None of them rule him. So excellence is required because it's the exercise. It's the dance. We're here because a lack of excellence is either because we're running in circles or we're too lazy to put out good energy. So excellence is required, but not for the reason we think. Excellence is required because in the effort to overcome those qualities, we will become who we're meant to be. But we're not loved by God because we got the first prize. We're loved by God because we exist. And then we're loved, we remove the vibrations that keep us from feeling that love. And that's what success really is. Everything, Swami and I used to call it petty enthusiasms. All these little things that we would do, like write books, give lectures, stuff like this. This was just stuff we would do because we had to do something, had to be useful in the world. But separating that, true humility, is just separating that from our self-worth, from our happiness. This is what spiritual power is. I mean, what you see is, and once you've relaxed into that reality, then everything else just follows. So if we need to go to the core issues, and it's just imagine. And that's what we should do in our meditations or in our walks or wherever we are. It's like, I am perfectly loved by God. Being a disciple of Master, having been with Swamiji as much as I was, I have just certain phrases. One of them is, I am the disciple of a great master. Woohoo! I have woken up to the spiritual reality of life. And everything else is extra after that. And that's what we're seeking here, my friends. That's where the power comes from.